I'm your host, Sabrina Salvati. I'm your host, Sabrina Salvati.
Hello, welcome. Happy Sunday evening, everyone. Welcome to the Ethnic Women's Panel. We are here for our first episode. The hope is that we'll be able to do this at least once a month. And I'm going to be your host tonight. So I'm Sabrina Salvati. I'm the host of Sabs podcast. And I have a group of wonderful women here tonight. Afeni will be joining us shortly, and Josana should be here shortly as well. But first and foremost, I want to go around the panel and have everyone introduce themselves. I'm just going to go in order here. So Kim.
Hey, good evening, everybody. My name is Kim Brown. I'm the host of the show Burn It Down with Kim Brown, where our goal is to set oppression ablaze and to understand that something can, will, and must better arise from the ashes. I'm a longtime broadcaster. I've long been covering politics and issues that are important to women, Black community, conversely, Black women, in things that concern environmental justice and a variety of different things. So I'm very excited to be here. Thank you so much for having me, Sabby.
Margaret.
Hi, everybody. This is Margaret Kimberly. I'm coming to you from New York City, from Harlem, to be exact. And I am the executive editor of Black Agenda Report and author of Presidential, Black America and the Presidents. And I'm very honored to be with you all.
Courtney and Keisha.
Hey, y'all.
Hello.
We are coming to you from Virginia. Our whole thing is we're sisters. And
We have a podcast called This Is Bullshit, where we talk about politics. We also have another podcast where we talk about Real Housewives, but
it's called I Hope They Show Bravo in Hell. But mainly we use our YouTube channel to show just our everyday lives. We moved back in with our parents during the pandemic. So the aspect of what that's like being college educated and needing to move back in with your parents. So we just kind of document that. And we also talk about current events and politics.
Right. And we're working class, and we're all for class solidarity and trying to teach people that if you have a job, you're working class, even if you're white collar, don't think that you're better than anybody else.
Yes.
Awesome. Delilah.
Yeah.
Hey y'all, I'm Delilah Barrios. I'm from Texas, and Sabby and I worked together before on podcasts, but currently I'm running for governor of Texas, so I'm a filthy politician. But that's not like the best thing about me. I'm an activist, and I'm a mother, and I'm a healthcare worker, and I'm just, I'm about class solidarity as well, and I think I'm really excited to be involved with this with all of you, and so thank you for inviting me.
Zineb.
Hey everybody, I'm Zainab J. I am currently the executive director at the People's Party. Before that, I worked for Brand New Congress for 4.5 years. So I worked with candidates all across the country, not taking PAC money. I've seen how they started out awesome and then ended up maybe not being so much so. Before that, I was an activist. I worked as an advocate for survivors of domestic violence. And my background is in journalism. So I was also in investigative journalism that covered policy, activism, politics. So yeah, just glad to be here tonight. And I'm coming from Southeastern Kentucky, down in the hills of Appalachia. So
Awesome. So tonight we're going to talk about issues that are important to us as women of color that may or may not be covered by mainstream media or just not covered enough. So the hope here is to educate everyone, to tell you about issues that we are dealing with that you may not know about, you may not be familiar with. I'm just going to go in order here and have everyone mention the issues that are important to them. And then I'm going to circle back with those issues and open it up to the panel. So I'm going to start with Kim. Which issues do you think are important to you?
It's a very lengthy list. I will certainly try to condense it down in the interest of time. But there was a recent event that happened here in the state of Maryland where I live that involved someone that was a high school classmate of mine who committed a atrocious act of domestic violence in the issue of he committed 2 murders and then killed himself. And it really got me to continue to think in the direction of how much our community is in desperate need of addressing continuously the issues of both mental health crises and domestic violence. And that is something that I try to routinely bring up on my program. Also, the issue of rape and sexual violence in the Black community, in the ways that our gay and trans brothers and sisters are also targeted for sexual violence, I think is very important. Another issue that I really find of extreme importance has to do with environmental justice, as we see with the increasing strength and violence of storms that we are not accustomed to seeing in certain months, like in the month of December, for there to be an E4 tornado come through Kentucky in December is horrific. And we see those communities that were most impacted were poor and working class communities, Black and brown communities. So this issue of climate change, excuse me, and how it also pertains to environmental justice are definitely things that I believe not only need more conversation, but they require more action and more political pressure on our elected officials, because it is disproportionately us who live in cancer clusters. Our children suffer disproportionate rates of asthma. So obviously this is a public health issue. So in the ways that environmental justice absolutely tie into public health.
Well said. Margaret?
Well, today is an interesting day. We were, the Kabuki Theater of Congress is coming to a close on this Build Back Better. And Senator Manchin says he can't support this bill. But it is, he's the bad cop. He took one for the team. I don't think any of them really want it. And how does this impact Black women? We're told to be politically active, but we're encouraged to vote, only to vote. And what we're seeing is the result of voting only. And especially when Trump was president, we got to get Trump out. People have to turn out. You've got to get rid of Trump. And what do we get? Betrayal. All of the things that Black women need, increase in minimum wage, all of the things that were supposed to come from this legislation. The child care tax credit, which they went on and on and on about. He's cut child poverty in half, which was a huge exaggeration. Well, it's dead. It just ended and they went home for their break. It's not going to happen. So I would like for Black women to be politically active, but that has to be beyond electoral politics. We have to, as our foremothers did, act against these people. That's when we have made the greatest strides, when we were unafraid to make demands we knew they didn't want to meet. So that's the biggest thing on my mind. Also, COVID. It's been almost 2 years. We've been living like this. Now there's a new variant. There will always be a variant as long as it keeps spreading. And so this is a public health issue. And we've had 2 presidential administrations that have failed the American people. And as always, Black people have suffered disproportionately. So those are the 2 things on my mind right now.
Keisha and Courtney?
I'm going to say amen to everything Margaret said. Good Lord, it's a mess. So we have separate brains. So I would say definitely everything that Margaret said, we talked about it in depth today on our own channel, but pivoting from that, I think oftentimes about 2 things. Civility. I think that Black women were expected to not give in to the angry Black woman thing. And I think right now is a time to be angry. And so I feel the same way with just working class people, just people in general. Our society has been programmed that to have intellectual discussion, we can't yell, we can't do this, we can't curse, can't do that. But we're at the brink for so many things that level of civility has got to be broken. And so I just wonder how other people are dealing with that and being able to handle, because I know my emotions, I'm like, fuck this shit. And then in terms of climate, I would say I just think about what happens after the events. We always think about what's happening before, but the towns that got decimated, it's going to take years for those places to come back. When we're talking about weather patterns changing, that's crops changing. That's, there's just so many things. Like, we need to have stores of beans. We need to have generators. Like, my mind is constantly going on those things. So how can we protect ourselves and the average person to be prepared for when, extreme weather events are going to happen that we're not going to be able to deal with. So that's my brain.
I agree with both of those, especially climate change. For me, I think a big issue that I don't think gets talked about enough is where everyone's talking about abortion now, of course, because of Roe v. Wade, but I don't think people are talking enough about birth control and the ways in which our society tries to keep you from getting very good birth control that could last you 5 or 10 years with no hormones, and they want to keep you on a system where you have to pay into it every single month. It's not the most effective thing. I had to find out the hard way after having an abortion that, I needed to switch to an IUD, or that it was even an option. And
having a blood clot.
Yeah. So I think there are, a lot of our health issues around reproductive rights that really should be spoken a lot more before we get to the point of needing an abortion,
Right. There's stuff you can do beforehand.
Well said. Delilah?
Okay. So, most of my concerns are with my community, and environmental justice is also a top concern for me. We protest pipelines and we try to show up, be against fracking, but living in this state, it doesn't matter how much, how many people show up, unless, like, the news avoids it. Like, I'm just tired of being silenced as an activist, and I'm tired of being told to wait, and I'm tired of having to, put everything on hold just to make sure that I have human rights and basic access to things that we all need. So, all of the things that y'all have discussed previously are very important too. I think it's really difficult to be in this world as a woman right now. And all of these issues are important, from economic justice to environmental justice to just, being able to be in a position where you're well enough or you're healthy enough to protest and to show up and pay attention to all of these threats against us all the time. I mean, it's we're supposed to lose. We're supposed to be too tired to do anything about it. And, I'm ready to have more and more people doing more things about it besides electoral politics. Those are my concerns.
Zainab?
Man, everybody had really important things. It feels like it's just a shitstorm out there. Everything is just, it sucks, right? Everything's awful. And trying to figure out, I completely agree that, electoral politics isn't only going to be what's going to change things, or if it's going to change things, we got to have action and organizing. So that to me is something that's really important. And I was kind of on the same vein of Courtney, really thinking a lot about domestic violence. I still have a lot of women that reach out to me. I myself am a survivor. And I remember how, being young, racism is what impacted my father's Afro-Iranian. And so it's what impacted our lives growing up. But I started thinking about and doing the research. The onus is always on women. It's always on us to protect ourselves or to learn about it or to prevent it. And the cycles of abuse, you don't always know in the beginning what's happening. You don't know till later. Most of these women don't know what they're getting into. There are warning signs, but the onus isn't really on men. So I thought it might be good to talk about, what it would mean. I'm a mom, what it would mean to teach our children, what it would mean, in public policy, to put more onus and shift that culture setting where the onus isn't on women to protect ourselves only. The onus is also on men. And I do agree with Courtney about protecting the trans community as well, because it's one in 4 women report it to 1 in 3 women, but 1 in 2 trans women are impacted by domestic violence or assault. And so when we're talking about these things, I believe that we should also be emphasizing on how to inform, and tax dollars should go toward that. Initiatives should go toward that. Activism should go toward not only the onus being on us as women, but the onus really being on the perpetrators of this violence and the culture that it started in the first place, and that's ongoing and that's been here forever.
Well said. I want to introduce Josana. Josana, can you tell everybody who you are?
Oh, hi everyone. Can you hear me? I had like computer problems. Hi, I'm Josana. I am part of the collective Revolutionary Blackout with Sabrina. I am also an activist for immigrant rights, and I am a Brazilian Black woman, and I think that says a lot. Going over what I think that it's something that I would like to bring up is that I I would like to have a voice. As a Black Latina woman, I would like to have a voice. Reason why I say that is because we are here in America in the Imperial Core. It's important that our brothers and sisters do the inner work every day to wash away white supremacy out of their veins and pay attention to the outside of the core of the US and see us and hear us. Oftentimes, we get carried away because our voice doesn't matter, because we are coming from places that we don't even speak English and we don't even know what's going on down there. So it would be great if we could have a voice. I come from a country that unfortunately it's champion in killing trans Black women. And I would like for our trans Black Latino women to also have a voice, to also be protected, to also know that they matter, and they do very much. And I would love for us to be able to unite with our brothers and sisters from the North so we can see real change. Because if the change doesn't start inside of us, if we don't wash away these imperialist tendencies outside of us, we will keep repeating on the cycle of the leader, the bully of the world. So I think bringing attention to the South American issues, and especially in the Latinx community, for the Black women, because us Black Latino women, we are oftenly just erased. It's like we don't exist because we are put in all the same bag. So it's one thing, and one representation of that group is always white passing. So I would like for us, Black Latina and Black trans Latina women, to have a voice and be heard.
Well said, Josana. For me, I think one of the biggest issues that I've noticed is that there seems to be a problem with Black women dying during childbirth in 2021. And I don't have children, but would I like to have children one day? Absolutely. But to be honest with you, I'm scared because I've heard the stories. I heard Serena Williams' story, and this is someone who is rich, and even her doctor wouldn't listen to her about the pain that she was going through, the physical pain that she was going through. She said, had she not sought out another opinion, a second opinion, she could have died. So there just seems to be this lack of empathy, I think, when it comes to Black women and having pain, whether it's physical pain, mental pain, or emotional pain. There just seems to be such a lack of empathy. I want to go into the issue of domestic violence because this is another area that I've noticed. I want to open this up to the panel. It seems like to me, people that I've known that have been victims of domestic violence, which I want to say to everybody, it is not easy to leave a domestic violence situation. And if you've known someone who's gone through it, you understand a lot of times those women, they are isolated from their family members, or they don't have maybe like an income where they can just take their money out and go somewhere else. So it's very difficult for them to leave those situations. But one of the things I've noticed is that it seems like when it's women of color who are in those domestic abuse situations, there seems to be, again, a lack of empathy. There is not as much compassion when it is a white woman going through the same thing. And this is just something that I've noticed. I want to open this up to the panel about when it comes to domestic abuse. Feel free to jump in.
I think there is a tendency, we have years and centuries of Orientalism to also wash away from our views. There is a huge work done for us to have the figure of the villain or the figure of the strong, because that's another damaging figure, that we are supposed to be strong, that we don't ache, right? That we don't have pain, we don't feel pain. And I think, in the other hand, our white sisters are always considered the victim. They really easily victimized and cradled, sorry for the English, but like cared for and embraced. And yes, there is a space for your pain. And I think that I passed a similar situation to this recently. There's always a space for the white tears. There's always a space for white tears. And there's always, it's very fast, it's very like, it's a snap of fingers that women of color, especially Black women, are expected to be like, oh, but why are you crying? Or sentences like, well, I know you probably provoked him, right? How many times women have to hear that? Or why were you wearing this? All these sentences are thrown at Black and women of color like we are expected to be doing a favor and everything is our fault. And it's also impressive to see in numbers how whenever a white sister is disappeared, is kidnapped, all the campaigns, all the save hashtags, and how many Native sisters are still disappeared, kidnapped, and we don't even know when they're coming back home. So yes, these are centuries of Orientalism that have to be washed away and taken care of and changed.
I'd like to add something here. I think this is these are legacies of chattel slavery. You cannot hold people as property and also consider them human. You can't. You either got to not have slavery or dehumanize. And this dehumanized Black woman lives on and on in the imagination of the society. Sometimes in our own, we've got to be careful. This whole, people think it's a positive thing to say Black women are so strong. Well, no, it's not. Some of us are strong, some of us aren't. Sometimes we are strong, sometimes we're not, and that's all fine. But when you're literally property, treated as a breeder, quite literally, as a beast of burden, quite literally, you're not going to be humanized. And that legacy lived on through Jim Crow, through lynch law, and through mass incarceration. So it's not possible to have these structures in place and also to think about the people who are being victimized as human beings. And so that's going to happen everywhere. It's going to happen on the job. It's going to happen with healthcare professionals. They're not from another planet. They're like everybody else. They see us the way everybody else sees us. So you're not going to go to the hospital and be treated better than you're treated anywhere else. So I think we have to keep in mind those unpleasant truths when we talk about this situation.
Oh, Kim, I think you're muted. Oh, nope, you're not muted. Hold on.
Can y'all hear me?
You guys hear me now?
Yes.
Yeah.
All right. I'm sorry. So, just piggybacking off of what Margaret said, it's so important to understand that this is the treatment that we are going to have to face pretty much in every single walk of life, in the workplace, in healthcare settings, your children in school settings, in higher educational settings. That you are always, we as Black women and by extension women of color, we are always going to be looked at as less than and as deserving less, which is why it is so important for us to not only vocally and enthusiastically advocate for ourselves, but advocate for our sisters, right? If you are in a position, and I say this especially to, I know we have some white folks tuned in, if you got the white card and you are able to parlay that to help another person, non-white person situation, it is very important that you do so, because it is important for white allies and comrades to understand the dire real life consequences that Black women face daily when it comes to racism, from outside of our community and in the misogynoir that we face sometimes from within our own community. So there are strength in numbers. So if we are willing to speak up for each other and even sometimes sacrifice for one another and flex whatever privilege that we may personally have on behalf of one another, I think that is the best way, or one of the best ways, for us to fight all of these structures that are absolutely built against us until we are able to literally burn them down and start anew.
Kim, I think your volume is a little low.
Okay, I'll check it. Thank you. Sorry about that.
If I can you all hear me? I think my mic was turned off earlier. Yes? Okay, great. So yeah, these are all specifically going back to what Sabby was talking about, fears for being treated poorly, in the medical community. We absolutely have to use whatever privilege we have whenever we have it to speak up for our sisters. You know what I'm saying? Like, if you are able, I think everybody needs to designate like a patient advocate, because the privilege I have is that I have worked in healthcare for a very long time. And so I can just use my experience to make sure that I'm treated well. You know what I'm saying? And to make sure that people that I care about are treated well. I'll go with them to the hospital. All of this is scary, especially when you look at the true history of this country based off of white supremacy. I mean, Hitler definitely studied how colonialism affected my ancestors, and how colonialism affected all people that were brought here against their will. And there are shadows in our current systems from those structures that we started with. And you have to come to a place of undoing and unlearning these biases that you learned. The best doctors I've ever met are people who are very humble, and they understand that they don't understand everything. And so they have to, listen to the patient and listen to the people telling you, like, I hurt, and don't not say that, oh, you don't feel pain, or that's not serious enough. Like, it's the best doctors always listen to the patient's needs without bias. And it's hard because a lot of people have that still. And it's very rare to see people operating without them. And so I think a lot of it is just not just cultural awareness and society awareness, but like, we have to have that expectation that we are going to be respected, and we need to be demanding it, and other people need to demand it for us too.
I love that you said that, Delilah, because I have such a like I mean, I feel like I try to look healthy, but I haven't gone to the dentist. I haven't gone to go get certain checkups I need to. And I think a lot of it comes from an initial checkup that I got, a mental health checkup that I got, or I wanted to go see a psychiatrist, and she laughed in my face. I mean, she was like, "You have nothing wrong with you." I mean, she didn't even ask me any questions. And that experience alone made me feel like no one will ever understand what I'm going through. No one's going to listen to me physically, mentally, whatever. And so I think like that advocacy of having somebody who looks like me, who understands what it's like to have, different features than it is for a white person or whatever, and just to know that you're interpreted in a different way. I mean, there are a lot of things I just think health wise I shy away from because of a price barrier standpoint, and also because of that initial the initial thing of just being completely laughed in your face. Like, how do you recover from that?
Right.
You just, nobody cares.
I mean, to add to that, I would say, Court knows I recently had to get in a fight with my doctor. I just was able to get Medicaid here in Virginia because I didn't make enough. I'm low enough income. And it turned out to be a blessing because I ended up having a kidney infection and needing to go to the ER. But the doctor that I got, the ER was fine. They treated me very well, I thought, actually. Like, they did get us mixed up. There was another black woman in the little stall next to me, and she was unfortunately having a miscarriage, and he came in and told me, like, talked about that, and me and my mom were like, what? That's not.
So we switched up the woman who was having a miscarriage,
right,
with Keisha, who was having a kidney
infection.
Okay.
So yeah. So and even so, I felt like, he kind of cleared it up and he made it fine. But the doctor that I had after that, I felt, who was my like prescribed, assigned doctor, was very disrespectful and didn't seem to want to take the time and listen to me and care. So I love what you're saying, Delilah, about being able to have someone to be able to go with you and to be able to help you. I think what we have to do now is kind of like stand up for ourselves and just stand in our power and say, look, I'm paying you to do this service and you need to check me out properly. And a lot of times we have to do our own research and we have to say, look, I think I need to have X, Y, and Z test. And you just have to stick with it and be harsh. And I know it's very hard to do, but unfortunately, I think unless we stick up for ourselves or maybe have an advocate come with us, it's going to be very hard for us to get good healthcare.
Yeah.
Yeah, I want to get Zeneb in too.
Oh yeah, I was just going to say that, one of the problems that I found is if there's, for illnesses and diseases, it kind of reminded me, what you guys were talking about sort of reminded me of not being aware of diseases or disorders. I have something called thalassemia, and it's from my Iranian background, and it's very rare here in the United States. And so, with that being said, the last time that I went to the doctor, I went for hypercranial tension, which I didn't even know that's what it was. It's tied to the thalassemia, but no one knew what it was until they found, a neurologist who was, she happened to be an Indian American, and she actually diagnosed it because she understood the disorder. And I've talked to a lot of women. I have friends that, have sickle cell anemia, for instance, that have other disorders that are not necessarily ethnocolonial, that they have trouble even getting diagnosed or are dismissed because they're outside of the framework of what, is usually studied within the borders of the United States.
Well said, all of you. I agree with all of you. I want to talk about the climate change issue because this is something that does impact communities of color, Black and brown communities. This is something where I felt like when Bernie Sanders was running, when he was on the debate stage, he didn't really do a good job of connecting the climate issue to Black issues, to, people of color issues. I felt like he didn't do a good job of that, and he really could have drove that home. So, for example, what happened in Flint, Michigan with the water situation, that would never happen in Beverly Hills. And it's really important that people understand that. This is happening in communities where it's predominantly Black communities, where there are indigenous communities, people of color. and communities that are lower income. And I think this is something that we need to talk about, because a lot of times people discuss climate change and they just look at it as though, oh, this is a green initiative. This is something that college students are fighting for. This is something that all of us should be fighting for, especially those of us that are people of color, because it is our communities that are affected. And I want to open that up to the panel as well.
Yeah. Are you guys able to hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. So I had to laugh. I think this was last week when Joe Biden and Kamala Harris were out selling some of the climate policy aspects of the Build Back Better. And one of the things that they were heavily touting was this new initiative to create or build or, place 500,000 electric car charging stations across the country. And I'm like, yes, that's it. Electric cars. That is actually a brilliant solution to climate change. Meanwhile, the Biden administration has been approving oil and drilling pipeline projects at a record pace, something at a very close number to the amount that Donald Trump actually approved. And even when he was debating Donald Trump, he made it very clear, Biden did, that he intends to stick with fracking, which we know is extremely harmful to the environment in a variety of ways. It releases methane gas, which is terrible, worse than carbon in a lot of cases, and the damaging effects to drinking water locally where fracking takes place. Not to mention that fracking is causing seismic activity in Oklahoma, which is preposterous, that this is like an ongoing continuous thing. And these are the sort of policies that Joe Biden wants to double down on and back. So it's obvious that the Biden administration is not serious at all about climate change. And I think that some of the only ways in which we can better advocate for our communities is to, I guess, hold some of these oil and gas companies personally liable, or liable as corporations, for the damages they cause to us. And we know that our Indigenous brothers and sisters have been fighting this fight, continuing to fight this fight against the black snake all over the country. Here on the East Coast, the Mountain Valley Pipeline, they're fighting it down in Southern Virginia and in the northern part of North Carolina. And of course, that terrible pipeline that finally completed, I think, the Enbridge Line 3 in the northern part of Minnesota, which is at the headwaters of the Mississippi, which, God forbid, if that ruptures or leaks, which I believe it already has done in small ways, so many more people would be impacted. So it's clear that Democrats, especially the Joe Bidenites of the party, aren't serious about really addressing climate change from a legitimate, serious policy standpoint. And even the voices within the party who support efforts like the Green New Deal, oftentimes they get drowned out, or the legislation or the policy suggestions, they get completely watered down and usually don't have any bite or substance to them. So we cannot trust Democrats on this issue.
No. And who dies when there's a natural, quote unquote, natural disaster? We had on the New York and other places on the East Coast a couple of months ago, there was the remnants of a hurricane from the Gulf, which flooded New York City. People died. People drowned who lived in basement apartments. Who lives in basement apartments? Well, low-income people, obviously. Look at what happened during Hurricane Katrina in the Gulf. People were displaced. Who was made homeless? The people who lived in the most undesirable, the low-lying sections of New Orleans and other places on the Gulf. So people are dying from asthma, dying from, trash is still being burned. There's a city in Pennsylvania, Westchester, 2 words, Westchester, Pennsylvania, mostly Black community, where they burn garbage from all over the Northeast. So it's important to point this out, and to also to amplify what Kim was saying. When the Democrats say they're going to do more about the climate, they're just lying. So Trump will leave the climate agreement. Biden gets in the climate agreement, but all they do is kick the can down the road. COP26, it's a longer issue, was pretty much a joke. Yeah. So as with everything else, our people suffer the most when this treachery continues to take place.
Yes. I am so riled up about. Okay, can I just a few things for the infrastructure bill that was passed? I think that it's an absolute farce, and they really think that we're stupid, and that's really where we're at right now, because you're talking about the amount of money that they passed with the infrastructure bill and the BBB that's now tabled over a 10-year period. Okay, over a 10-year period, what do we spend in 1 year for climate disaster, for a climate event that happens? First, we spent $91 billion in 2018. Then we spent, I think, like $101 billion in 2020. And then we're at 104 already, 104 billion. So what is 500 or 550 billion going to do for climate change when you spend however many $billion once the town is decimated, once the water supply is gone, once the oil's in the water? Like, it's too late then. So these numbers that they put up to try to pat themselves on the back make me so infuriated, because they mean nothing when you actually want to talk about what it's really going to mean in people's lives. And on the other side of that, the lead pipes. Okay, the lead pipes. Let's talk about the lead pipes. The lead pipes are opt-in. It's an opt-in program. Everything in the infrastructure bill is an opt-in program. There are no penalties. It's only credits. It's a credit. Oh, okay, you're a corporation. You want to switch over to the good lead pipes so you don't poison people? We'll give you a credit. There's no time limit. There's no mandate. There's no penalty for it. So you think a corporation is just on their own going to decide to do the right thing? I don't think so. Definitely. So those are my issues with it. I'm just like, and let's also not forget, just in terms of like, when Keisha told me that people who work on Wall Street are just gamblers, you know, like I had to reframe my mind. Like, for politicians, I mean, politicians are just rich kids who are upheld by their legacy or dynasty or some sort of money. They know nothing about climate. They're not scientists. They're not economists. So all of that put together, just like how we are letting people who are not experts on the subject lead us with sound bites on what we should be doing about climate, we're never going to get anything real.
Yeah. I totally
if I could just add, the military defense budget is $768 billion
for 1 year.
And all of the federal money via forms of fossil fuel subsidies go straight back to the source of all of our pain and misery, which is, again, I have to just keep saying that this resource extraction methods are deeply rooted in colonialism. And it's just like, for the people that are sitting here and we're like, are you seeing this? Are you seeing this? Because you can't just, make your water source pristine again. There's no way to do that. And then environmental racism, back to that point, yes, our communities of color disproportionately get affected harder, worse than others do. But at this time, I think it's really interesting that it's such a subject of concern globally. And I'm just like, is it because it's starting to go into the white neighborhoods now? Is that why people are talking about it more? I'm just wondering, I'm trying, you know what I mean? It's like, we've been dealing with this for so long. I'm glad people are talking about it now.
I think that could be, but I think that there's also something to a big piece of what's missing that we're not talking about yet is climate refugees and what's going to happen when India is underwater. What's going to happen when Miami, for that matter, is underwater? Where are all these people going to go? Who's going to take care of them? Who are they displacing? I mean, that's a huge portion that it doesn't even seem like they've attempted to address or even acknowledge. I mean, there are the island of Tuvalu or whatever, like, over by New Zealand, they're literally walking in knee-deep water. So the time is now. It's already happened. These things are already happening. I don't know how we're going to be able to get them to move any faster, and what we're going to do when all of these people think that we have some sort of higher ground or attempt to get to higher ground in this global society. I'm hoping it's going to all work out. I don't know.
I mean, what Delilah said, it's getting to the white neighborhoods. It's
right.
getting there. And
that's where it's going to get to them.
They're seeing that they can't buy their way out, which was the plan.
Right.
Yeah.
I want to go ahead and introduce Afeni has joined us. So Afeni, go ahead and introduce yourself.
Hi, my name is Afeni. I am a co-organizer with Freedom Fighters DC, and yeah, I'm really excited to be here. Really excited to represent, all the Black queer folks that are out here in the movement as well. I don't know if there are any other Black queer people on this panel, but yeah, shout out, we here.
So we're talking about how climate change is affecting communities of color. Zeneb, I want to get your take on this, and then I want to bring in Affinity as well.
Yeah, when I think about this, I always think about like future projecting. Here in Kentucky, we've had poisoned water my whole life. We've had mountaintop removal, we've had fracking, we've had, the pollution from coal. But I kept hearing, people were always talking about future projecting, and I thought, man, in poor communities and communities of color, especially, you drive to the west side of Louisville, you drive to the south side of Columbus, and you see it. That's where all the factories are. That's where all the pollution is. You can smell it in the air. And people are living that way. People are putting plastic up on their windows. And one of the things that makes me so angry is this whole Ayn Rand progressivism when it comes to climate change, is what I call it. But it's all like liberal nonsense. It's buy plastic straws, recycle, buy an electric car. All that stuff's expensive too, and it doesn't make an impact. It's like that way they're able to take the responsibility off of the corporations that are the real polluters and try to put it on individualism, and especially within poor communities, blaming poor communities, blaming people of color for pollution when it's corporations, it's the government, it is the system that's in place that perpetuates it, and it's a lack of regulation. It's not because somebody used a plastic straw instead of a metal straw. And that's no reason for people not to feel guilty for not holding corporations and our representatives accountable.
Thanks so much for the super chat, Oz. He said, this panel of wonderful women is the epitome, brilliance, compassion, and strength. It's a pleasure and honor to enjoy this thoughtful and insightful discussion. Thank you all. Thanks so much, Oz. That's really sweet. Afeni, I want to get your take on this.
Absolutely. I think a lot about like the ways in which like Blackness intersects with climate change, especially considering that Black and brown people in coastal cities are going to be affected by climate change the most. The countries and the continents on this globe that provide the least in like global emissions are getting hit the hardest by the effects of climate change, and we really need to start having that conversation because there's like this, I don't know, like I feel like Americans are very individualistic when they think about climate change because we see all the tornadoes and everything that are ripping through our country. But there are people that have lived in the global south that have been sounding off these alarm bells for years now. And so many people, even, people that are on the left in America have also ignored that. And so it's just really important now that since we're having the conversation, when we have the conversation as far as like US domestic policy goes, things like the Build Back Better Act that barely scratch the surface of actually solving anything for climate, those aren't good enough. And us as Americans, we are one of the biggest contributors to carbon emissions and the problem that is climate change. And we are privileged enough in this country to have infrastructure, to have the capital to build better infrastructure and protect ourselves. But yet we're leaving people in the global south completely out of the conversation, and we're not funding their governments and not giving them any incentive to, instead of going through the entire industrialization with fossil fuels, to skip that and go straight to renewable energy. So when we talk about things like the Build Back Better Act, we need to talk about what it looks like to actually meet the mark, because we are currently experiencing climate change. Like, it's not coming, it is here. We are watching our death come, and there are so many people, like so many young people that have been, trying to march and organize. Even in Glasgow, they had 40,000 young people marching in the streets for climate change. So we have to keep that up, and we have to make sure that we're including the voices of the people that get silenced the most, that get cropped out, that don't actually get mentioned. like we need to make sure that we are amplifying those voices as well. And yeah.
Josana.
I made a little list while we were talking, because when Delilah says, like, we've been dealing with that for so long already, we are in the global south. I remember growing up and to learn that the northeast of Brazil was a desert and it was not supposed to be. And how the indigenous people in Brazil are being assassinated by the agreement between Bolsonaro, which is the president of Brazil, for those who don't know, not mine, but he occupies that place. So it's an agreement between Bolsonaro and Monsanto for the soy plantation that is okay to invade sacred native land and kill indigenous people. They are being assassinated. If I go through a list of videos I have, like the cars coming in and killing entire tribes. As soon as he won the election, or as soon as Dilma was taken out of the power by a coup d'etat that was sponsored by the USA, there was a tribe in the Amazon rainforest that they didn't have any contact with human beings from other parts of the world. They didn't have no contact with the white man. What happened was, as soon as they took Dilma Rousseff, was the president that suffered the coup d'etat, out of power, that land was sold half to Canada and half to the United States of America. That tribe was assassinated. There's no one person of that tribe alive. And it's funny to think that we always looking inside of the US, as Afeni just said, like we're looking around here, yes, but you also have to look how the US is contributing for the decay of the world, and it has been doing it since it became this potence. It uses the global south to exploit the natural resources. Mm-hmm. And the soy plantation and the cattle farms are killing the Amazon rainforest. And many times you go and they belong to big corporations that are made in USA. They're not the farmer, the old man or woman in the middle of the forest. No. They belong to big corporations, and that's why it's devastating. I remember going on a helicopter flight over the Amazon rainforest in 2007, and it's so saddening because it's big, and then you see these huge spaces of dead forest. They look like stations, like 5 of them lined up of dead forest. And it's funny to think that right next door, Puerto Rico is still recovering from Hurricane Maria that happened in 2017, 4 years ago, and Puerto Rico is still not recovering. They're still there's nowhere they can go and rebuild from that. And it's right next door, but no one thinks of it. Everybody thinks of Miami. Oh, everything is okay, Miami. But everything is not okay in Puerto Rico. Everything is not okay. And when you go from the macro to the micro, you go into the neighborhoods in Puerto Rico that are suffering the most. These are Black indigenous people. They live in the favelas that we also have in Brazil. So the tentacles of this country have to be cut in ways that they won't grow again. And just to add, there are just 100 companies responsible for 71% of global emissions. This is a study also from July 10th, 2017.
I just want to say well said, and thank you for bringing that attention to what's going on in the global south as well, Josana. I want to give a shout out to Be the Change. Thank you so much for the super chat. Excellent and much needed discussion. Thanks so much, Be the Change. This brings me to the next point that was brought up. I believe it was Josana who brought this up about having a voice as women of color. Josana's experience is a little bit different because Josana is coming from another country. So she came here as an international. So I can already imagine some of the struggles that you've had to deal with here in this country, because I see it a lot. A lot of my students are international students, and I see what they have to go through, especially the women. But I want to open this up to the panel, because this is something that I've struggled with for a long time. Not so much anymore. A lot of you can probably tell I talk a lot now. But growing up, it was really hard for me to find my voice, especially when I was in high school. I joined the debate team, and that kind of helped me break out of that shell. But for the longest time, I couldn't figure out why that was. And then I started to realize that I did not feel comfortable having a voice when I was in spaces where I was maybe one of the only few. And so, coming from a diverse background, I was a military kid. I was used to being in spaces where there's a lot of diversity. When we came back to the States, all of a sudden I was in spaces where a lot of times I was like the only Black person or only Black female in the room. And it was like all of a sudden I didn't feel like I could be vocal. Or if I was vocal, I didn't feel like I was heard. Sometimes I feel like I was talked over. And I know this is something that a lot of us have had to deal with. I want to open this up to the panel as well. How do we find our voice?
I think we have the voices. I think that it is a matter of trying to recondition society into valuing our voices and to listen to us. Because for one, society conditions us as Black women not to take up a lot of space, right? Because, you don't want to bring too much attention to yourself and be perceived as uppity or be perceived as someone that knows it all, or you have an opinion, or God forbid even be the angry Black woman. You want to make sure that your presentation is well received by those who are in power, who are men and white people, right? So we are taught, sometimes even within our own spaces, not to speak up, or even when we do speak up, as you said, Sabby, our contributions are diminished or talked over. And I think that this is a big problem that we have with patriarchy, obviously in America at large, but even within our own respective ethnic communities as well. And that's something that I know that each of us in our respective communities are dealing with our men regarding their tendency to sometimes do that. Of course, not all men. I hate to preface that with not all men, but yes, not all men do that. But it is acceptable for some men to do that. And I think that what we have to do, we have to just continue to be loud, right? Or even be find ways within, like, even if you're not like a loud sort of person, the power that you can find even within the range of your own voice and your own presentation. And we have to stop judging ourselves by these external standards. Like, I do not care what white folks think of me. I do not care what a man has to say about what I think about a particular issue. Like, we also have to abandon any sort of desire we have for this sort of mainstream acceptance, because we're only going to get it if you stick to a very particular script. And if you are serious about the liberation of women, and then Black women and women of color, sticking to that script and telling the truth are things that are impossible to do at the same time. So, we have to retrain. Like, unfortunately, the work always falls upon us, but the work unfortunately is going to fall upon us again in order to recondition and retrain our society to listen to Black women, listen to women of color, listen to Indigenous women, listen to women from all parts of the globe, and take us seriously, because 9 out of 10 times we're usually right about a majority of things. So listen to women, basically, is the lesson.
I agree with that. I'm sorry. I also would just say with what Kim was saying, to be loud. I would say also the loudness, remembering to be loud in all of our emotions and not in only the strong ones. And I think that that's something that, because people know how to listen to emotion. Listen, I've been in lots of things with like a lot of white girls in my classes and such. And the second they cry, people know how to react to that. But I never knew how to cry. I never knew how to be vulnerable. Right. And I think that as Black women, we know a lot of loudness in showing our strength. But I think I think, for us too personally, like to let other people see us be vulnerable and that we need help, or that this has hurt our feelings, or that you know what I mean? That's not a sign of weakness, but that I think we need to be loud in all of our emotions and not just turn up just the strength one. Mm-hmm.
Thank you. I agree with that, and I also want to say, and I think I'm pretty sure I'm the oldest one. I know I'm the oldest one here, and I just want to tell everyone I have suffered a lot more in my life for not speaking up than for speaking up. And I tell that to everybody and it's unfortunate. I think you have to be taught to be assertive from a young age. And if you don't get that permission when you're a kid, it's hard to learn as an adult. And I'm still learning that at 62 years of age. But speaking up 9 times out of 10, you end up better off than if you don't say anything. So if people don't know anything else, it's the squeaky wheel that gets the grease, and all sorts of interactions that we've been discussing tonight.
Yeah, absolutely. And like just to add on to that, like I recently learned like a couple weeks ago that, women and people that are, that have been historically subjugated, like we are conditioned to explain ourselves more. We are conditioned to like speak more in order to like get our point across, because we don't traditionally hold the power. And so what I would just like to add to what everybody's saying is, yes, we should be loud. Yes, we should take up space, but we should make sure that our actions are just as loud and bold as the actions of whiteness and white supremacy are, because whiteness and white supremacy, they don't have to say nothing. All that moves in silence. The nucleus of the power structure of this country is financial power. All of that moves in silence, but it's still controlling our entire lives. It's still such a powerful, mechanism that we still have to deal with. So I would just say, like, as we are being loud and as we are demanding these things, we should also be creating safer spaces within our circles as Black women, especially, to protect each other and to create spaces and to create space for others of us to have opportunities and to come up. Because, I've seen, that people, like when Black women are competitive in a space, like one Black woman will assert herself. And you've seen that sometimes like other Black women will just, instead of backing her up and instead of saying like, no, she's right, and we're all, not only are we being loud in our words, we're being loud in our actions and standing with each other, some people will just let her get ate up. Like we can't continue to do stuff like that. So while we're, encouraging our sisters to be loud, just make sure that you're ready to protect her when the power structure tries to strike back at her for speaking her piece. Yeah,
that's a good point.
Yeah, because that will happen.
It will.
Delilah, I want to get your take on this.
Yeah, I think these are all very valid points, and I'm so happy to be in a space where there are other women who are like, I'm going to be loud. I don't care, because I've been like that my whole life. I've always been the dissenter in everything, and I try to teach that to my children, because I feel like well-educated kids have questions, and they don't want just a simple answer. They want to figure it out for themselves. And so we have fostering that environment of growth and learning is really important. Not just as women, but just in your communities is essential. You can't grow where the soil is not good. You know what I mean? We have to foster that environment where people are able to learn and to make mistakes and to feel supported. So, to answer your question, like, how do we make ourselves heard? How do we get to a point where we feel confident and valid enough to make ourselves heard and to not let other people silence us? Because it takes a lot of bravery to do that. Is, we say, a lot of my Indigenous relatives will tell us, we'll go on and on about decolonizing yourself. You have to decolonize your mind. You have to decolonize your diet. And you have to, and it goes back to what Afenia was saying about the programming and the conditioning. We are all exposed to it from a very early age on. And unless we have that strong sense of community, or some support systems, we don't ever, it seems like a lot of people can grow up and not ever find their voice and go years and years without feeling that they're able to use their voice as they need. And so that system of support is essential for any progress, I think.
Zainab?
Yeah, I got like two thoughts on this. One, I think a lot about I'm white presenting, I'm light colored. So I always try to walk in a space of being cognizant of that. On top of that, I've also experienced discrimination. So it's like 2 feet in one, my feet are in two different places, but sometimes that means stepping back and turning over the microphone. That means, taking a seat when it's a situation or something that I may not understand because I don't live with the same challenges day to day. So giving voice to those who are living with those challenges themselves so they can speak for themselves instead of, speaking for somebody else. I think too often people are speaking for other people or, I've trained like 100 congressional candidates from AOC to Cori Bush to a whole bunch of people. And one of the things that I kept realizing is there were two things about that. One, I saw a white savior complex from some of these people, where they didn't want the tendency to allow space for other people to speak, but they were going to be the voice for others. And that's just not something that works. The second thing that I realized is one of the things that I had to train women, especially women of color, especially Black women, but all women that I worked with was saying, I believe, I think, and it's a different kind of thing that's in our brain where we feel like we have to sometimes temper down, or a lot of women do. I know I've experienced this. You got to temper down what you say to make it digestible because you don't want to come off angry, or you don't want to look like you're emotional, or you don't want to. So you use filler words like I think, I believe. But if you listen to men speak, they don't say that. They just go out there and say, not all men. I'll say the same thing Kim said, but some men do. They will just go out there and they say the thing, but we try to preface it, and we try to temper it down sometimes to make it digestible. So that's one thing that I always trained female candidates, go out there, say it. It's fact. You believe it. You know it. You don't have to say, I think this, I believe. It's a fact.
Yeah, to Zainab's point, I mean, you're saying what you're saying about, we're always making space for others, but you have to make space for yourself, because I think something that Courtney and I have realized just through this kind of like making our YouTube channel and just like living together, like we hadn't lived together as sisters before, is our experiences are very specific and very important and impactful. And everything that happened to you actually happened to you. Like something bad did happen to you, and you should be able to speak about that bad thing that happened to you and feel confident in it and understand that that is your experience and it's important. Because I think that a lot of times people think like, oh, well, I'm just a waitress, so what do I know? Well, you know a lot, because the guy who's managing the place doesn't know anything. I can tell you that. So just know that your experience is worth something, and it's something that you should be able to. It's hard for me. I don't I speak less, not as forceful as Court does, but like I try to remind myself that like, oh yeah, like 41 years on this earth and all the different jobs that I've had, I know a thing or two, and just as much as the man next to you or the white person next to you. So, just, I like what Zainab's saying is about just like, just say it the way it is, if you can.
Don't second guess yourself.
Don't second guess yourself.
Yeah. Josana?
I was hearing everything you said and thinking about decolonize yourself, decolonize your veins. I like to say your veins because it's just should know that it's inside of you so tight. You have to wash it away. It's an everyday work, every minute, 24/7, watching and washing, watching and washing. And I say that to the fact that, look at that. So the Latinx term was created to put in the same bag every single country where you speak languages of Latin roots. And that justifies it well. But it brings back to putting everybody in a bag. And then, oh, these are the Latinos. Pay attention to, with that, you are erasing the story of each and every individual in this bag that I'm calling Latinx. You need to know and look for knowing that ethnicity, and I think I'm saying that word wrong, please correct me because I want to be educated, is different from race and is also different from nationality. How many times here in the US I heard that I am not Black? Because in the Black culture in the US, a person that's from Brazil is not considered Black. How can you erase the identity of that person and the whole history of that individual just by not making the work on yourself? Because I believe that the Latinx term was actually created to support the divide and conquer. Because it gets our relatives from the north thinking they are like a little bit better. Latinos. And with that, we are separate. And I remember a video from Malcolm X where he says, and he says specific Brazil, he says, Negroes from America should unite with Negroes from Brazil. Because Brazil has the largest African population outside of Africa. And then we are a majority, and then we can bring on change. Because we're stepping in stolen land, occupied, invaded by the white people. We need numbers. And when we don't make the work of washing imperialism, white supremacy from inside of us, and as people of color, we have it. We have that inside of us. If we don't do the work, we will repeat that model. And it's funny to think like the racism in Latinx countries is veiled because we have like a cultural core. The US is very divided. You have communities very divided. It's really hard to find the core identity for the culture of the US. I mean, I found xenophobia so far. Sorry. But the countries of Latin root, you have that very mixed core of cultural identity. So the racism is veiled. And then you see white passing Latinas crying white tears and being embraced as women of color. And when we were both back in Brazil, cops were punching me. And she had got in her Uber and went to Beverly Hills from São Paulo. So we need to like wash away and be aware of the divide because there is a divide. It exists. If we're not aware and if we don't wash away white supremacy out of us, we're not going to be able to see. And if we're not able to see, we're not able to change.
I want to add something here to go off of that. Big Teal said, can't believe folks denying Afro-Brazilians. So Josanna, I'm really glad that you brought that up. That is something that happens a lot in this country. We're divided by different like nationalities. We're divided by colorism, which I think I'm gonna do a whole separate panel on colorism. Anything to keep us from, like Josanna was saying, from coming together, right? So Josanna is here and she is letting you know that even though she is from Brazil, she is still Afro-Brazilian. So she is still Black as well. And I've seen this happen a lot in the United States where Black people, those of us who were born in the United States, sometimes we may consider other people who come here who are Black not to be Black because they weren't born here in America. At the end of the day, me and Josanna and me and my friends who are from like Jamaica, we go through the same struggles. If the police are going to pull me, they're going to pull them too. And so I think that's what people need to understand. We should not be divided amongst these types of things. We really need to come together. I want to go into the civility part that was brought up as well. In reference to like women of color, this is something I've also noticed. I forget which one of you brought it up, but there seems to be this perception that like we have to pretend to be a certain way or act a certain way. Otherwise, we'll be seen as angry women. I'm one of those people where I have RBF. For those who don't know, is resting bitch face. If I'm not smiling, I look a little angry. And I have been in workspaces where I have been told, or I've been asked this question, are you okay? Is everything all right? And I'm like, yeah, everything's fine. And being asked that so many times, it gets to the point where sometimes you feel like you have to go into work and you have to code switch. You have to pretend to be someone that you're really not. You have to put on a fake smile sometimes just so you don't have those attacks come at you. And I want to open that up to the panel as well. How do we deal with civility? How do we deal with this, especially even in professional spaces?
Well, I'd like to tackle that first. Part of the problem is the way we're raised at home. I think, especially most Black people, we are raised to be polite, to be respectful, to be courteous, and then you're the only one being respectful and courteous. So because that's what your mom how she told you to be. Nobody at your job is like that. So I think it's important for us to realize, and that's the code switching we have to do. It's like, wait a minute, this wait your turn, this give the other person space on the sidewalk. That's not what people outside your family are doing. That's what your mom told you, but nobody else is doing it. So you've got to give yourself permission to be different from the way you were raised and realize that that doesn't work. That does not work anyplace else. You may get your mom's or your aunt's approval, but you get run over in the workplace or run over on the sidewalk. So I think it's important for us to just say these things. And I don't have kids, but I think people with kids, that's one of the things that they have to be taught. Yes, I want you to do this, but outside of here, nobody cares. And if you're the one who gives the other person space or lets them take over or lets them speak first, then you are the loser. And it's a difficult balance, but I think that's one of the things we have to acknowledge.
Absolutely.
You go ahead, Afeni. Go ahead.
I would say, like, I'm a second gen, like, American, like my family's Jamaican and Panamanian, and I was born in Germany, but I was pretty much raised here. And I was raised around a bunch of white people. And so being Jamaican and being the only lesbian, being one of the only Black kids in all like pretty much white environment, like the conditioning of like trying to be nice to people that aren't being nice to you, like even in my like family setting, even in like my classroom setting where I'm constantly being disrespected and having to be like, okay, my mom and my grandma tell me I have to be nice to you, so I'm gonna continue to do that so I don't get in trouble. But I don't know. I feel like eventually I just kind of got to a point where asserting myself was the only option. Like, I'm not going to keep letting people talk to me crazy. I'm not going to keep letting people call me a shadow or a gorilla or anything else like that. Like, I'm not going to keep being like, y'all are not about to keep teasing me for my sexuality and my family. Like, I'm not about to keep dealing with that. And I don't know, like maybe that's a part of the reason why I am the way I am now, like just not really about to deal with any of that, not even from the government. But there's so much more like just true power in just asserting yourself and just genuinely not caring what people think, because your community, your people will find you. And one thing that I realized being like a gay person, being a Black femme, is like your family, your community, that is created. Love finds you when when you are who you're supposed to be. Like, there are plenty of people that have lots of money or that are married to men that have lots of money. There are plenty of women that do that and they're miserable. They have everything that they want, but they're miserable because they're not asserting themselves. They're allowing themselves to be, talked to any type of way, treated any type of way just because they're getting things. They're getting like some type of material. Like, it'll never be worth it. It'll never, ever, ever be worth it. So we always, as Black women, as women, period, as non-binary people, as trans women, we have to stand up for ourselves. We have to take up space for ourselves and for every single woman and non-binary femme that cannot, speak up for themselves as well, because they're just, not everybody is ready to tussle. You see what I'm saying? But yeah.
Thanks so much for the super chat. See the change. I love you all, beautiful sisters. I feel so good being here in community and solidarity with you all tonight. Thank you for taking your time to share with and educate us. Love. Thanks so much.
Yeah, I think the issue of civility, especially as a Black woman, I think putting civility on the shelf, or rather, even better, throwing it in the trash, I think is actually going to extend our lifespans. And I say it for this reason, is because as Black women and as women of color, we experience higher rates of high blood pressure, of heart disease, of cancer, of hypertension, of kidney disease. And we would be foolish to assume that racism, we know, is influencing our higher rates of these diseases for certain. But stress stress is going to kill you, ladies. Stress is going to kill you. And the stress that we have from being silent or from having to bite our tongues is a stress that we do not need to put on ourselves, right? And I understand, like, we have to move certain ways and certain spaces in order to advance, in order for white people to not be afraid of us, etc. But at the end of the day, they're still going to call you aggressive, even if you try to be uber nice. They're still going to call you mean. They're still going to say you have an attitude problem. They're still going to say all the usual tropes, even if they are not true about you, right? Even if this is not what's actually happening. It's just so very easy to paint Black women and women of color with these sort of garbage myths about how we interact in the workspace, with not and never considering the amount of stress and sometimes even trauma that we experience at work, without a question. But when it comes to civility, like, I don't think that it serves us. I don't think really don't think that there's a place for it. And when I say that it's okay not to be civil, that doesn't mean that it's okay to be unkind. And I think that you can be uncivil and not be unkind at the same time. And that's not a sort of nod to being, polite or or knowing your place. But just understand that when you have to put things a certain way for the other party to receive what it is that you are trying to communicate, it's okay to do that. And if people get their feelings hurt, well, then so be it. You know what I mean? It's not in that case, it could be your feelings or their feelings. and in that instance, you have to look out for yourself to make sure that you and what your needs and desires are being properly communicated. So I think it's okay to be uncivil. The older that I have gotten, the less fucks I give about the way that I say things, because I have to make sure I get my point across. And people who are not women and not Black will sometimes intentionally misunderstand me. So I will put it as plainly and as straightly as it needs to be said in order for people to understand, even if they pretend that they don't understand. So I don't think civility is going to serve us in the 21st century well at all.
Kind of marrying the topics of civility for me with what Miss Margaret was saying. I learned, I feel like, civility from the Black Baptist Church. It was always yes, ma'am, no, ma'am. Like, I was helping out every Sunday. I was in the dance. I was an usher. You know what I mean? It was like, you have to show up. And I feel like that the civility that's being taught to me very much reminds me of what's also like a through line that's there with the Democratic Party. And maybe that's what I'm trying to get at there, but it's almost like us younger generations, I went to church, I did all the right things and all of that. And I think there's no amount of, life experience just happened. And I think the younger generations, you just couldn't hold us back from seeing something is not right. Mm-hmm. And we want to respect an older generation that I think is more in line with the Democratic Party. But I feel like where I have an issue with civility is how radical, I guess, I can be perceived by them, and how much I see something like a Democratic Party mistreating them. Right. Straight up lying to their faces. So, like for us, we live with my parents, mm-hmm. and my cousin, he's an older Black man. They're all Democrats, and I don't want to hurt them. That's the civility I'm talking about, yes, and everything else we've been talking about, but how do we reach those people? Because I feel like they've got this line of civility where you've got to respect your elders. There's this level of,
you have to respect politicians for some reason.
How do we get them to see you are being lied to, and what they are doing is not civil? Mm-hmm. What they are doing is, you know what I mean? Like, how come they don't see that? Right. How come they don't see the lie? as uncivil? How come they don't see that? That to me, I don't care what word you put with it. You can curse, you can say whatever, because it's the intention behind it. And to me, when you lie to my face, then that's what it is. Okay, I don't care how nicely you said it. That's uncivil. So to me, I'm like, how do we get them to see that and go, ooh, that's the problem? Not me saying, damn or fuck sometimes, but the actual, like, we keep, because we need those votes. We need those influential voices in the Democratic Party. People have been voting for Democrats forever. I think we do need those people to be able to come, because they do believe in a lot of the things that we believe in, healthcare and all of these different things. They do believe in them, but for some reason, I feel like they're beholden to the civility of the Democratic Party and what that means, and some sort of loyalty there. And that's what I can't really figure out how to accomplish or overcome. I don't know if that makes sense.
It's interesting because when you said that, it made me think of what I wrote down. My note was that I don't even notice it. Like, I don't even notice when people are like mistreating me, I guess, because I'm so trained to be civil and trained to be nice to people and trained to, like follow the things that I'm supposed to, that I don't even notice it. And so to me, that goes to your point of like, maybe it's like it's just not even connecting for them.
You want the situation to go along.
Right.
So I'm not going to be a roadblock.
Right, exactly. But it's also just, I think a lot of time, I think maybe it's not even connecting for them that they're being mistreated.
Right.
So.
Well, I think you're absolutely right. And that's something I have and continue to struggle with. It's a survival mechanism to disassociate ourselves from these painful situations and to say that everything is okay. Because if you acknowledge it's not okay, then you have to do something. And if you haven't been given the tools to know what to say, to know that you have a right to say and do something, then you just don't notice. So I feel that. I relate to that very personally. As far as trying to move other people along, I think we just have to lead. People are afraid. That's what politics has taught us. Just be afraid, because the only thing, especially Black people, politically, the only thing you can do is keep Republicans out of office. There's nothing else you can do, say, ask for, demand. Just, that's it. That's all you're going to get. And that fearfulness has brought us to this low point where this awful man is in the White House, having lied about the minimum wage and lied about student loan debt and lied about everything that he knew people wanted. But the response is still, but Trump. Why do you think they keep talking about January 6th? Because that's how they keep people in line. But we have to speak our truth. And I think as conditions deteriorate for people, it will be easier for them to hear us. And we have to know there are people who hear us already.
If I can.
Go ahead.
Sorry, go ahead. Yeah, sorry. No, I love what y'all are saying about throwing civility away. Like, it's not here. It doesn't serve us. Because in my mind, I never wanted to be in politics. Like, I just have to be truthful. Like, I never wanted to be in this position. It was only after years and years and years of watching and seeing failure after failure of us not getting anywhere that I was like, I got to do something different. I have got to do something that I'm not comfortable with. You know what I mean? I have to let go of whatever. I have to get outside of my comfort zone to do something that's really impactful. So, I think part of the problem is when we show civility, people mistake that for consent to continue doing the wrongs that they're doing. And I think as a liberated people or on our way to that place, we have to let go of that, because that expectation really doesn't serve you. And again, being civil is great if we're fighting for the same thing, if we're on the same team, if we're trying to uplift each other, not just get by. You know what I'm saying? So when we change our goals around to what do we all need, how will women really, really come into themselves, how can we shamelessly be authentic without having to worry about how society perceives us, that can be very transformative. And And it's good to see that happening more and more, because it's needed. It's needed. The Biden administration talks about healing the soul, but they don't know anything about medicine. And you know what I mean? Like having these communities and having this support, that's more that helps heal more than anything else. So, I just think it's important to remember that we can't continue to consent for these things that we don't agree with anymore. We need to just be as loud as we can.
Zineb?
Yeah, I've been studying social movements for a lot of years, right? And when I think about civility, I think back to like Edward Bernays, in the 1920s and 30s, when they literally launched in the Great Depression a whole propaganda campaign, a literal propaganda campaign around civility, and the whole campaign was to keep people quiet. Civility has been, sorry, my Appalachian doesn't allow me to say it properly. My civility has been used over and over and over again as a blanket to quell movements and to shut people up and to slap it down. You got to be civil. You can't get out in the streets. You can't, you have to protest the right way. You got to protest in the right place. You got to fill out all the right forms, right? Even though they're cutting back more and more, like our First Amendment rights and where you can even stand up and speak. You got to protest in the right way. You can't drop a knee. You can't say things certain ways. You can't complain about the national anthem. You can't speak loudly as a woman of color. You can't show up as tens of thousands and block traffic so that it stops commerce for a day so we can get shit done. Being civil has been used as a blanket to suppress movements, not just in the United States, but globally. And it's on purpose. There's two different definitions of civil. There's one of being polite and kind. And then there's another that is representing the people representing themselves. When I think of being civil and I think of being civically engaged, I want to take that term back. And I think getting out in the streets, creating mass movements, creating boycotts, raising hell is being civil. That is being civil because it's being responsible for ourselves and it's coming out to represent ourselves, because we can't just rely on these politicians to do it for us. We have to do it for ourselves.
Did we get to Josanna and Afeni? Did you get a chance to comment on this one, the civility?
Yeah, but I just have one more thing. Like, what the hell is a civil right? Like, I don't want civil rights anymore. I want actual power. You know what I'm saying? Like, I want financial power. I want some land. You see what I'm saying? Like, I don't want civil rights anymore. If we're going to continue to have this conversation about, about what it looks like to take power back, like, let's meet aggression with aggression. I can tell y'all, like, the center of this power structure in this country is the financial and war powers. Ain't shit civil about either one of those. So as long as they're going to continue to be aggressive in their ideals of, financial discrimination, environmental racism, sexism, transphobia, like, all of that is aggressive. So we have to match that energy, because that is where our power is in standing up for ourselves and standing up for our comrades. Our power is in targeting the financial and the war powers and actually getting our slice of the pie, getting the land back for the indigenous peoples of this land and the indigenous women of this land. Like, that is where our power should lie at this point. Like, I don't want to have any more conversations about Democrats that want to, like, play nice with each other. If you do not agree with universal anti-bias healthcare, you are my enemy. If you do not agree with actually defunding and abolishing and dismantling the police state in this country, and that includes the military, you are you are my enemy. If you are not going to actually push for real reparations, and I'm not just talking about checks and hands, but I'm talking about land too. If you're not going to push for real reparations, you are an enemy of mine, because at the end of the day, we cannot keep half-stepping. The world is ending. Black people are dying every day. Black women, Black femmes are dying every day. We don't have time. We don't have time. So we have to start being aggressive, and we have to be okay with that, because that's where our power is, period.
Josanna?
I think civility in the United States is a code, and it's a code that is used to control people. Because like as an outsider, and I will always be, because y'all's culture just reminds me of that every day, right? There's no like opening your eyes and your heart because I speak with an accent. I'm from down there. I'm an outsider. Um, as an outsider observing this culture in this country, I just realize like I just keep on thinking and like, damn, but they have access to guns. They're not out there in the streets fighting. No. Wow. I remember myself in Brazil fighting the cops. They were gassing us, they were mazing us, they were like rubber bullets raining over us, and we're throwing rocks back. We don't have any access to guns. Damn, 40% of the taxes go to the military. Everybody could just stop paying taxes. Come at the end of the year, we're not going to pay because we do not agree with the wars. So stop paying you because we are paying you 40% for your freaking military that's destroying every single other part of the world. And the other 60% is for your corrupt ass. Sorry. I'm sorry. No, people keep on paying taxes. Damn, they have 40 hours schedule of work, no paid vacation, no paid sick leave, no rights of whatsoever. But the brave and the correct American is the one that works. So to me, civility is a code. And I will include that in the white supremacy code that has to be washed out of our veins. Because it's, to me, it's impossible to perceive the craziness of I have to go to work, I have to pay my taxes. What are you getting out of your taxes? I want to talk about this subject because it's really weird to me. Taxes are, speaking capitalist language, an investment in a country because you are here, you are working, and you, quote unquote, have land, have housing that you built because you work in this country. So you're going to make an investment with the taxes over what you make in a year so you can have services back. Roads, public education of quality, food, housing, universal healthcare system. Y'all have nothing like that. They take y'all's money, they use the way they want to use, and they keep just doing it. Because everybody's so civil and calm and passive. And I really don't know. Sometimes I feel like there is no solution because the only solution that there is has to come from us. The politicians, they're working in their careers. They are going to go up in their careers. So therefore, they will deny the people. So they can be Nancy Pelosi and all the other positions that they have to occupy in the corporation, which is politics in America. It's one party. There's no two-party system. It's one party. It's the party of white supremacy. It's the white party. So the only people that can bring the solution is us. But if we keep on just doing what they told us to do, and it's funny because in the 70s, there was the military coup in South America that was sponsored by the USA. And in a scholar grade, they included civility as something that we had to study. It's coming from here.
You know, I wanted to respond to something. Josana said some important things there. Americans are afraid. We don't fight back, not pay taxes, all of the things you mentioned. We are afraid because we have, it's not lost on people that we live in the country with more people in prison than any other in the world, that the police have the right to kill us, that the court system is stacked against us. People are afraid. Now, what we have to learn is how to act in concert and take away some of that power. But I don't think we should be confused about why it is that people don't act. They hit you with the hammer if you do, but you get hit with the hammer if anyway. I don't know if you've all saw the story about the tornadoes, December tornadoes. How about that? in Kentucky, and a woman was an Amazon delivery person, and she was told, you better keep driving, and she's texting, but there's a tornado siren. And she was afraid not to do it. Now, she lived to tell the story, but okay, you lose your job, and that's a no small thing in this country. But you could, if you lose your life, so what? But that is the problem in this country. People are afraid because they are treated so badly.
Well said. I want to give a shout out to intermediary Fossil. Thanks so much for the super chat. Love anarchy. Thank you so much. I want to, since you brought up
I'm so sorry, Sabby. Can I just say that, Ms. Margaret, it's just that we are treated very badly everywhere. If you were able to see how the police comes to the favelas in Brazil, they come shooting. They don't put it's like we are treated very badly everywhere. And the reason why, I'm sorry, I'm interjecting, is just to say that us, the rest of the world, we're getting tired because we've been waiting for y'all, because we want to fight alongside y'all. We want to transform this, but y'all are not.
Well, I think I would tell people around the world, don't wait on Americans. That would be my first piece of advice.
We're too comfortable.
No, we're not waiting. We've been fighting, but we're trying to get.
I know. But I would just say this. But you pointed out something else earlier about Malcolm X. We have to be internationalists, and I think that's one of the things that you're bringing up. We cannot see ourselves as being separated from the rest of the world. And Malcolm X was the ultimate he was a Pan-Africanist. He was an internationalist. And Americans seem to think, we were talking about people, I don't know, deciding somebody else isn't Black because they're from somewhere else. I don't know who these people are who think they're going to be treated better than Black people some other place. They're not going to make some safe spot for you. So I think internationalism is a kind of self-preservation, and people need to stop thinking that we can act alone without the rest of the world, because the power is here and the power is in other countries too. So we must, and Americans need to be better informed about the rest of the world. That's a big problem also, but we can overcome that. But internationalism is vital.
Yeah, this brings me to the other issue. I believe it was Margaret who brought this up. Being politically active beyond electoral politics. Now, this is important because the Democratic Party heavily relies on our vote in order to win. Without people of color, without our vote, they don't win. The Republican Party doesn't need our vote in order to win. So how do we convince people, and I'm definitely in this camp of going beyond electoral politics, how do we convince people who may have been conditioned that the two-party system is the only way to go? And also, how do we convince people who are, sometimes there's a generational divide with this. I know, like with my parents, it took a lot of convincing, finally got them to come around to it. But how do we convince people who have been conditioned, who are consuming mainstream media, CNN, MSNBC, and they think that this is real news and believing what they say about the Democratic Party? How do we get those people to understand that we need to start doing something different? I think I'm going to start back at the top with Kim.
I think that we are at a point now where most of the people that you described, Sabby, like Black folks, people of color, but even our boomers who have been Democratic loyalists, it's like when you start posing the questions to them, like what has the Democratic Party done for you? Like what has Joe Biden specifically as a politician done? And Biden is an excellent example of what these establishment Democrats have been doing for the past 5 decades. Because, obviously everybody here knows what Joe Biden's record is all about when he was, in the Senate for many decades and then Obama's vice president. And, he really was an enemy of the people on so many issues, ranging from the environment to consumer protections, to militarism, to the crime bill. Like Biden's entire political career is standing basically against poor, marginalized folks. right? And I think when we start posing these questions to our elders, like, what did Obama do? Like, you tell me what you think is good about the policies that the Democrats have actually gotten accomplished, not the shit that they run on, the shit that they have done. And I think now we're seeing more of it, at least I would say a clearer eyed analysis. Maybe it's not 100% clear yet, but I think it's getting there, where people are really beginning to understand that Democrats are just as racist as Republicans, if not more. Perhaps it's just done in a different way. It has a different face about it, but the end result is still the same. That Black people's material conditions overwhelmingly remain the same, and during the Obama years, I mean, our condition even worsened. And when people are able to put these pieces together, I think they start to understand that there's a bigger political world out there beyond the binary of Republican and Democrat. Now, it's not organized 100% well, where it's a nationwide effort, but the fact that we cannot continue to show loyalty to a party that does not show loyalty to us, that only gives us lip service when it's election time, and will instantly renege on all the promises made. I think at the very least, people are starting to understand that we cannot be simps any longer. Like, we cannot be fools, we cannot be patsies, we just cannot be pawns politically for the Democrats to retain power. So where that goes next, I'm not really sure, but I think that what we are going to see is more people not only abandoning the Democratic Party, but just outright refusing to vote for Democrats, especially on the national level. I'm speaking for myself here. I have a tendency to vote my local races and ignore the top of the ticket, just because I know it doesn't, in my opinion, it does not really make that big of a difference. But I think we're going to see a lot of that, and I think Democrats are going to drop off in the political power that they have, and that we should be preparing ourselves, unfortunately, to be living under Republican rule for the foreseeable future. Because I'm not voting Democrat going forward.
Who's next?
Man, I can speak on this topic if y'all want me to. So I do work for as executive director of the People's Party. So we are trying to build an alternative to the two-party system, which I think it was Joshana said that there's not two parties, there's one party. It's the corporate party. That's it. They've been that way forever. When I worked at Brand New Congress, we were supposed to run candidates. We were supposed to run candidates on zero corporate PAC dollars. It was all new, it was exciting. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, she was, nominated. She was actually, she was recruited by her community. Anthony Clark ran. He was Michaela Wilkes in 2020. We had some kick-ass people, but one of the things that I found was disturbing is some of these people, like, when they got up there to Congress, even the people that I believed in, I mean, the people that I knew, like the people that I worked with, that I knew, like I was close to some of these people. Like they would call me at like 3 a.m, like that. It's burning down. Like shit's going on. Zaina, help us through it, whatever. And still when they got up there, I saw some of them and they even gave me political speak. And I'm like, what are you doing? You're like, even me, you're going to give me political speak, but they made promises. They keep making promises. Promises keep happening. And even if we're running and we're sorting candidates, I think there can be good people out there running. But I think that it's also going to take a push from us in organizing action. Afeni talks about this all the time. And I love when she talks about this because she gets all fired up. It's not going to just be like, it can't just be, electoral politics that we rely on. We have to be the fire behind that. And as Kim was just saying, like, everyone's fleeing to voter rolls of the Democratic and Republican parties. Most people are registering as independent. We're sick of this shit. We're just sick of it. And I think it's going to take us coming out. It's going to, people look at these states and they're like, red state, blue state. Actually, it's most people in that state don't damn well vote. That's what most of it is. It's a non-voting state. It's not a red state. It's not a blue state. It's a state of people that don't want to come out because they've got two crap candidates on whatever side direction they look, that are bought out, that have sold out. Every once in a while, you'll have some awesome people run and you can get behind, but it's going to take us pushing. It's going to take people running, and it's going to take direct action, mutual aid, doing work on the ground, because while we're waiting for all this, incrementalism that they want to pass, the Build Back Better bullshit and everything else, we have to be able to take care of each other and ourselves. Sorry for the rant. Really passionate about this topic.
Yeah, I think, like the biggest problem that we've had on the left, so far is not having any real Black policy to pull Black women and Black men away from the Democratic Party. Because if you can actually, convince Black people that they actually do agree with you, because many of them do. Mm-hmm. Many of them can't identify themselves as leftists because we didn't do any outreach to that community. But if you, like, I do mutual aid out in DC, like if you talk to people, some of them do want to defund and abolish the police. They just don't know. They don't have the language to have that conversation. And as organizers, we're there to provide that language so they continue to have that conversation within their communities and organizing their communities for the betterment of them. If we, like, the longer we lack that, the more likely it is going to be that the Republicans are going to blow us out every single time from 2022 all the way up to 2034, because the Democrats have always done the same things. They get into power, they act like they don't know what they're doing, and the ratchet effect just keeps going to the right. And we can't, as Black people, as working class people, as women, we can no longer let the Democrats play with us and our vote. We cannot let that happen. And so if that means that, and I'm saying this as somebody who works for, a Democratic candidate in Maryland, I'm a registered independent, couldn't vote for if I wanted to, but it's so hard to get people excited about this because people fundamentally are starting to understand that it's going to take community organizing power. It's going to take us taking care of us in order for us to get real change. Change is not going to come through the ballot box. I hope Michaela wins over Steny Hoyer. I mean, I guess so. I mean, it's better than nothing, but I mean, at the end of the day, we're sending a couple more people into a white supremacist system in a white supremacist country that was built on stolen land by stolen people. So there's only so much change that's going to come from trying to play nice with electoral politics and send as many Dems as possible, because just like we saw in 2008 when Obama won in 2009, when they were doing all that, talk about the ACA, you had the Blue Dog Democrats that were fighting down the public option. There's always going to be a select group of moderate Democrats that are going to stop the entire agenda, because that's what they're there to do, to preserve the conservative nature of this country and of the political system. So in order for us to actually gain some power back, we have to ignore that power structure and build power structures outside of it. And that's really the only answer at this point if we actually want to get any liberation.
Yeah, one thing I want to add in reference to like having like Black issues on these tickets or the Black policies is really interesting to me right now. A lot of us are obviously dealing with student loan debt. Those repayments are coming around the corner very soon. I already got my email saying, "Are you ready?" So I just think that when you look at the data, it shows that Black women have the most student loan debt. So if you have someone who's in a position of power like Joe Biden, who says he's not going to cancel student loan debt, even though he can, then he's not trying to help out the Black community. And if they're not trying to help out the Black community, then you need to stop voting for them. And this is something that I continue to talk about because people still think that they're voting for the lesser of two evils. Evil is evil.
Right.
So if that means if you have to hold your vote, then just hold your vote. But we need to start doing other things. I mean, imagine if Martin Luther King and all the other civil rights activists were like, let's get this done through electoral politics. We'd probably still be sitting at the back of the bus. So it's just something to think about. I want to pass it to Josana.
It's just funny, Sabby, when you say like, so then Joe Biden is not on the side of Black people. He never been, right? He created the crime bill. I don't know what day that man in the history of this country was on the side of Black people. He's blatantly, publicly racist, and he had support of Black candidates to win an election. Not just win an election and elect Black candidates that turn their back on their own community. Very necessary to bring up that, because like the coon complex, right? The raccoon complex, it's crazy. Like it's everywhere, because as I said before, this is a profession. You don't care about the people. You're a politician. You're going to go up in your career. So you're going to associate with Joe Biden. And Joe Biden is going to go on TV and lie to everybody and say, you elect this person in Georgia, then you're going to get a $2,000 check that nobody ever got. And now, just want to do a shout out to the people that are fighting against the situation. They're using the hashtag student loan strike. And Ahmed, and there is a group of people, so the changes in the group too, that they're trying to find a solution, because it's 31st of January or 31st of December that you have to go back to the payments. Like, education is a public human right. Sorry, is a basic human right. Public education is a basic human right. Housing is a basic human right. Universal health care is a basic human right. We do not have basic human rights in America. And when we fight for them, and when we bring this up, we are considered radical. I have no idea what radical is.
Well,
Like,
we should own being radical. We should own it. It's like, yes, I'm a radical.
Yes.
Because for this backward country, Jazan, it's a very backward country. So things that are accepted in the rest of the world as human rights are not thought of that way here. And so it is radical to say that everybody ought to have health care and it ought to be free. But I think it's important for us to just own it and say, well, you know what? It's time for all of us to be radical. Because where have we gotten with this? My late colleague Glenn Ford used to say the Democrats were not the lesser evil. He said they were the more effective evil. And they would get away with doing worse things than Republicans. So there's no lesser evil with Joe Biden, with his blatant lies in order to get votes. And, and also we're going to have to leave some folks behind, because if people still want to defend him, if just saying the words Donald Trump scare them and they think they have to keep supporting this guy, we've got to lead. And there are millions of people who are ready. The people who don't vote, someone just mentioned the non-voters, they're ready. And so we have to be ready to think of all ourselves as leaders, because you don't need a certain title to be a leader. It just means that you're a person who takes action.
Don't you think that that's where the future of where we need to go is? What I was going to say is I don't have any trust in the Democratic Party whatsoever. I mean, I voted for them my whole life. I think a lot of us have, and I don't have to do a lot of things too many times to see how crazy that it is and how ineffective that it is. And I also don't like putting my money into things and getting nothing back, okay? Because I don't have a lot of it. So I'm already pissed off. What I'm saying is there are a lot of non-voters and a lot of independent voters, and if we can't get these people who are so loyal to the Democratic Party to see how they've been mistreated, I don't see how we can't energize. And the thing is, it's just policy. That's what I think personally, because Bernie superseded so much. Like Bernie, I think that people who liked Bernie, I mean, for me personally, he's not my savior. It's a policy thing.
Right.
I very much appreciate the work that he did, but the policy is what speaks above everything else and what draws people together. And I just think that if we can get to that place where policy is leading the conversation, and we can say, hey, listen, the Democrats, they're saying that they're for this, but they haven't gone for it. And we could actually get a party that was led with policy. We could get people behind it, because people believed in Bernie because of the policy. And that was really it. It wasn't about left or right or sticking it to anybody. So many people today, I feel like, vote out of spite. And this was not that. This was people actually feeling a real hope really feeling like, hey, these are the problems we have, and they're identified. And I think, with the polls, we've seen it. Individual policies will win, Medicare for all, and, alleviating student debt and all kinds of things. If you poll them, they will win. But when you attach them to a person, that's when they die. Mm-hmm. And so that's why I can't get behind that per se. If policy were leading it, I think we could get a lot of people behind that. And I just don't know if the future of that is in the Democratic Party, because a lot of it seems to be in identity politics or we're in identity politics. I don't really know what else they're selling us.
Politics, yeah.
Just selling us not being the Republicans.
I think any party that's going to do anything right now should be worried about Black people voting, because from just the Black people that I know, they're so disenfranchised, they're so beaten down, they're so just over all of it. They would choose just not to vote at all. Right. So in that sense, you have a group of people who, in theory, could be reached, but are just not going to vote at all. So if by chance, a certain, what if the Republicans decide to come up with some great policy? What if the Republicans came up and said, you know what, we are going to do $15 minimum wage?
The Republicans run from the left.
Then what's going to happen? Like, this is ridiculous. Like, if a non-conservative party, I'm not also not a Democrat, I'm independent. So, I think if they want to capture these people, to capture us, they need to really make a concerted effort and make some sort of plan. And I don't see that has been happening at all to any extent. And I don't think it's as difficult as they think it is. I agree with Courtney, just like you run on policies and you tell people what they need to hear. And also, I think that if the more that we can explain to people that how monopolies work, like they understand how Facebook works, how Amazon works, and how it's shutting down small business and all of that. We're in a duopoly right now. We only have these two options. That's not the only thing that existed. Before Amazon was there, you could go to Barnes and Noble. Like, something else existed.
You could go to a regular bookstore.
You could go to a mom and pop shop. Something else existed before. And I think people need to understand that we're not beholden to this duopoly. There's a way to break out of it, but you have to be bold enough and strong enough to break out of it.
Well said. Delilah is running third party for governor for Texas. Delilah, I want to get your take on this.
Oh, yeah, thanks. Living in Texas, it's really interesting because I hear a lot of criticism for people saying, I'm going to withhold my vote from the Democratic Party. And I hear people criticizing them and saying, oh, well, you're helping the Republicans. But it's not the voters that are helping the Republicans. It's the Democratic establishment that is helping the Republicans. And as somebody who is out there as a Green Party candidate, just trying to tell people that we deserve better, a lot of folks, like, I make more progress with a centrist or with somebody who's who votes conservatively than I do like a wealthy liberal. Wealthy liberals, they're gonna vote for the Democratic Party for optics because they want to look like they have a conscience, but their bank tells them to vote for the Republicans and to keep those policies in place that they benefit from. So a lot of it is just like undoing all of the propaganda that we've seen. A lot of people on the right will say, well, they may not be nice or our policies may not be right. But at least they're honest. Like, so, they think that Trump was an honest man. I know it sounds crazy. But that's what people say. They're like, I like him because he was honest. Whereas you get a Democrat down here and they're just blowing smoke up your ass, basically. And people are tired of that. It doesn't help the situation. It doesn't improve their living conditions. None of that matters to them. So I think everybody, it's true and it's right that policies are what's going to motivate people. But unfortunately, from what we've seen, those policies are dead because nobody's pushing them. The reason I joined Green Party is because we're constantly pushing for left policies. We're going to be on the far end, generally, most of the time. I try. I can't speak for other parties in other states, but at least for our Texas chapter, we are always going to be pushing for policies. So criminal justice reform and defunding and all of the, universal healthcare, UBI, all of those things we keep pushing, because even if they don't vote for us, we want our people to feel empowered to ask for those policies regardless, and to be informed enough to say, well, I don't have to vote for you, but if you considered these, then I would. And it's a shame because people don't there's no integrity left on either side, like especially Democrats. All I have to do is bring up Biden and people are like, yeah, I hate that guy. You know what I mean? He's a bad person. But you can't talk to them about Trump because they thought he was good in their limited respect. They thought the policies that he enacted helped them. You know what I mean? Like, we had the stimulus checks, we had a little bit more coverage for people. And these are real facts that liberals don't want to talk about. They don't want to talk about the fact that people, were able to stay home and quarantine during the pandemic. And a lot of people, they don't want to talk about the fact that Biden is deporting more people than the Trump administration does. But they want to hold you accountable. They want to say it's your fault as a voter that, we're in this situation, but it's not the voters' fault. It's both parties, right and left, same wing, same bird, like, you know what I mean? They're voting for the same things. And all the while the working and poor classes are being forgotten. We're being told that we owe them, and they don't owe us a damn thing. And that there's just something very wrong with that. So I'm open to any suggestions because, it's a struggle trying to break through some of those barriers with people, especially loyal to, like, party loyalists are, that's a hard word. Those people are harder to break through than, regular working class people who are like, more open to considering withholding their vote and voting outside of the two power structures. So yeah, it's definitely hard. If you look at Texas, and this is what the story that I tell every Democrat that doesn't want to consider me or vote me or even consider, universal health care. I'm like, and what are you proud about? Like, what are you proud about? We don't have abortion rights in this state. And that's going to start spreading around to other states. You know what I'm saying? So it's just, there's this ideal that you're safe if you let other people do the hard work for you, and that's not right. We're not getting anywhere with that. That's all I got on that.
Well said. Does everyone on the panel have time for one more question? I want to be respectful of everyone's time. I take that as a
yes,
yay.
one more, yes.
Okay, cool. All right. I want to get to the labor/living wage issue. So the bank solicitor sent this to me in the private chat. When it comes to labor and living wage, and as women of color, how has this impacted you in your lives? I can give a personal example that I witnessed myself at work. I noticed that there was a job posting. There were two candidates that came through. This is a previous job, by the way, not a current employer. Just want to make that clear. Two candidates that came through that made it to final round. One was a white man, one was a black woman. They offered the job to the white man first. He denied it, took another job instead, and then they offered the black woman the job after that. What I noticed is that the salary amounts were different. So you had a white man and a black woman interview for the same job, had the same years of experience, had the same amount of education, and they offered the white man more than they offered the black woman. And one of the things I want to connect this to, we were talking about student loan debt, and I told you that black women have the most student loan debt. This goes back to the racial wealth gap. How are we supposed to get ahead and decrease the gap if we are already being offered a lower salary than our peers? I'm going to open this up to the panel. I'll go back to Kim.
So I think the point is there, Sabby, is that we're not supposed to close the racial wealth gap. The racial wealth gap is in place. Even if black women were paid on parity with white men, I believe it would still take a few hundred years in order for at least the earning gap to be closed. Wealth gap is probably a whole nother different story. But that system of what you described of the white man being paid the most, more so than anyone else, absolutely more so than black women or women of color. That is what I call the black woman discount that employers give themselves to hire a very hardworking, educated, qualified black woman and then you pay her 30% less than what you would pay a lesser qualified man, or for the Black woman and the white man or even white woman to be doing the same work, and still the Black woman, regardless of education or qualifications, will be paid less. And those are intentional. I mean, that's deliberate. And we have to do our best not to take that personally. That is not a reflection on us, our performance, our experiences. That has everything to do with the social hierarchy being reinforced, and every single job does it, right? And um and especially when you discuss the issue of Black women having more college debt, more higher education debt than other groups, uh, and again, like, to me, that's just another scam that we get told, that we are conditioned to pursue. That, hey, if you get higher education, you get a degree or degrees, you increase your opportunities for greater wealth. But the problem is that you are already coming out of college in a bigger hole than your white counterparts, right? So the kind of debt that Black women in particular face when trying to pursue college education and trying to make it as best as we can in the work world, I mean, we're already way behind the 8 ball before we even really get started. So I think we need to call that out. We need to continue to call that out. Again, this is where I think our white allies and comrades could be of particular use. Like, share with your coworkers what your salary is. If you know that a woman, especially a woman or a woman of a Black woman or a woman of color, is getting screwed over, say something. Tell them. let them have as much information about it as possible, because oftentimes, we're very isolated, or we can be, out of the way that hiring practices are conducted in the workplace. So if you're a white folk, if you're a John Brown brigade, if you're a good white people out here, or you consider yourself to be good white people, again, please assert your privilege. Please assert your whiteness in ways that can help and benefit non-white and non-men people out here. But I think that to me, there are no short-term solutions to the racial wealth gap, because it's in place for a reason, right? And they are going to continue to uphold that throughout the job, the work world. I mean, that's going to continue. That's the way it has been, and it's probably going to be the way it's going to be for the foreseeable future.
Well, I think it's just your point tells us why the whole system needs to be changed. This idea of keeping salaries a secret needs to change. Everybody should know what everybody makes. This salary negotiating business. So if you have an in and you know what the salary was, or you were raised to believe that you had the right to negotiate, then you're going to end up with more money. No salary negotiation, no secret income. Put it all on the table. This is what the job pays. Take it or leave it. That's that. That's one of the things we need to do. As far as the racial wealth gap, we don't want a country where your wealth determines whether you live or not, or how you live or not. And that is why the things that we discuss being human rights need to be seen as such. Nobody should have medical debt. Nobody should have student loan debt. The minimum wage should be a living wage. We need to get rid of this gig work, which is invented to just oppress people more. So the way out is to systemic change for all of these things, because we're not going to get more racial wealth in a wealth equity in a system that's racist and corrupt. Thanks.
So I don't know if you guys saw, we just watched something with Dr. Cornel West, and he was talking about canceling student loan debt not being canceled. And one of the things that Charles Blow said was that 60% of Black college grads regret having got taken on that debt. So that's like an astonishing number. And I think that nowadays we can kind of, it makes sense to us now, but maybe like literally 5 years ago, probably that number would have been crazy. But now I think we can all see this coming to fruition. But as far as like the Democrat, I don't want to just talk about the Democratic Party, but I would say be wary of the Democratic Party and whether or not they're really trying to get you a livable wage. A livable wage is possible. We were working with the labor union in LA, and they just recently Hollywood got the highest minimum wage out of like in the nation. And that's after, of course, like, probably like 2 years worth of work to do that. But I think that we all just have to be very willing to work with one another and talk to one another for sure, because even in that type of situation, you guys are talking about salaries and all of that, but even in a situation like that, we're working at a hotel. And when we came to the union meetings and we said that we made $25 an hour as cater waiters, and the valet guys were like, well, we make $10 an hour or $15 an hour. And the chefs were like, well, we only make $10 or $15 an hour. And they're like, we wish we could make as much money as you. It really, once we started talking about it and started talking about the ways in which that actually worked, like, I mean, sure, we make $25 an hour, but we don't get that many hours and we don't get any benefits and we don't get this and that. It joined us all together. So, don't let them tell you that a livable wage is not possible, I guess, because it absolutely is. And I think that the more and more that hopefully some labor unions can kind of start to come to fruition and start to be voted on, I think that will help us a little bit. But don't be afraid. Yeah, I agree with everyone else. Don't be afraid to talk about how much money you make, and don't be afraid to. I love what Miss Margaret said about negotiating, because a lot of us don't feel like we're even able to negotiate or should be worth negotiating for. Or, I mean, you feel like if someone gives you an offer and they say, this is your offer and this is what we think you should be making, you just take that offer because you want it. And I think now is a time when a lot of us are either thinking about what we want to do for work or out of work or changing careers or things like that, and kind of like rethinking what we want to do. And now is the time when we have leverage and we have power, and we can actually use this time and use our leverage and power to talk to one another and talk about how much we should be making and make sure that we're getting what we're owed.
Yeah, absolutely. That's exactly right. I just wanted to follow up with that the only way to have that working class solidarity is to come to the table with that honesty. And as far as student debt and things like that are concerned, I heavily support anybody that especially students and especially working class people who are like, you know what, we're done. We're going to do this boycott. And so, we want to support that, because the Biden administration said that they were going to, forgive some student debt, and here we are, payments about to go out next month, and nobody's being held accountable for that. And so we really just, in this situation, there's the only options that we have is to use our labor force against them. So like for me, I'm a full-time worker still, and I expect to be for the foreseeable future, but I don't take corporate money. It's against our platform. Greens can't do that. And I'm happy for that, because I don't want to kind of muddy the waters, but I, every time people are like, how much do you make? I just tell them, honestly, I'm like, I make this much. I've worked here for this long. How much do you make? And they're like, oh, well, I don't want to talk about it. And it's like, that's okay. Just come to me whenever you want to, or if you have more questions, that's okay. And I think it takes there is some fear associated with that. I think that if you're afraid to tell people how much you make, you have to consider you're afraid of your situation. Your situation isn't as ideal as it could be. And that's why you're worried about competing with your colleagues about fair pay and things like that, because we are not guaranteed other rights as workers. So yeah, I worked with a lot of people on like boycotts and strikes and things like that. And so a lot of people have been leaving the healthcare sector. COVID, right? It's been bad. But they're like, we're going to have all of these job openings, and they can't offer people enough money. People are turning down very lucrative salaries because they're coming to terms with reality and the fact that it doesn't matter if you do everything right. You could still find yourself in a position where you may or may not survive going to work, and that really puts things into perspective. So one of the things that I try to work on right now is a general strike, and organizing and coordinating behind that, because now is the right time to be able to do that, because the powers that be do not care that they don't follow through on their promises. And so we have to show our force with our labor force, and withhold our power, you know what I mean, and use it for ourselves. So doing the mutual aid and helping your comrades and doing all that makes a big difference, because I don't see us holding any of these people accountable at this moment unless we show them where the true labor and power is.
Yeah, and just to really piggyback off of that, I was watching an interview with Dr. Claude Anderson. I can't remember what he's the executive director of, but he was basically arguing for Black capitalism and how Black people can liberate themselves by participating in the very system that oppressed us in the first place. And one thing that it just made me think of is like, why aren't more Black people pushing for like worker co-op businesses? Why aren't more Black people pushing for democratized workplaces? Because you could probably level the playing field a lot more if the workers actually own the means of their production. We need to be pushing for socialism, not only for not just because all workers need it, but especially Black workers in this society need to push for worker co-op businesses and actually owning the means of our production, because Black people have produced a lot for this country, so we're owed quite a bit. You see what I'm saying? And we should be pushing to get back what we are owing, to get back what we're owed. So that means that not only are we pushing for reparations and for land and all those other things, but we're also pushing for democracy in the workplace, and just socialism overall, where we can empower each other as Black workers and Black businesses and actually empower the community. Having a few Black elites up at the top is not going to do anything for all of the Black children that are starving in the hood. It's not going to do anything for the lead in their water, because those niggas do not reach back. So because of that, we need to start worrying about how to take care of the community as a whole, and trying to participate in a system that even Dr. Claude Anderson himself consistently conceded during this interview is built on exploitation. And no matter how you flip it, no matter what you do, who has the power in a capitalist system, someone still has to be exploited. And there is a social hierarchy within the Black community as it is that needs to be addressed and dismantled. So if we are participating in the same system that creates oppression, well, then who's going to be the next group that is oppressed when we all get into power? Exactly. It doesn't make any sense. If we're going to push for true equity for everybody in the Black community, it means that we need to push for socialism. Period. And that's like we can have conversations about the racial wealth gap, what it looks like to catch up to the 400-year plus head start that white people have had in this country. But we're also talking about, how to empower ourselves as well, because black people do not have Black communities. We got Black neighborhoods because we don't own anything.
Right.
And we need to create power for ourselves, period. And that is how we do that.
I'm just going to add something sorry, just one second, for what Afeni said. I think that when it comes to in your social circles, because this happened to Court and I just the other day, we were talking to my boyfriend, and he is very into Black exceptionalism, and Jay-Z says this, and he's taught us this, he's trying to teach us all these things. And I understand that, but we need to start teaching people that just because a few people got out of the hood doesn't mean that everybody's going to get out. That's not the solution. The solution is not for every single person to start their own business. No, everyone needs to have rights. Everyone needs to be paid equally. And because I feel like As much as I love music, I just feel like I don't want people to be misled to think that, number one, to think that they should have to do all of that, because not everybody wants to be a business owner.
Our biggest thing is, why can't we chill like everybody else?
Right.
Okay.
Let's just chill. We just want to chill. I want to go to work. I want to come home. I want to be done. That's fine. If I want to start my own business, great. But the programming is trying to make everyone, if you look at Instagram and follow any entrepreneurs, the programming is trying to tell you that all you have to do is buy this class and do this and do that, and boom, you're going to be making it. It's going to happen for you. And the music is also telling you that. You just have to be really careful about, just talking to your friends and just talking to them about reality. Like, let's talk about the reality.
Yeah, there was a poll that came out just a couple weeks ago, and it's like Gen Z and Gen Y, they still believe in this idea of the American dream, like a modernized version of it. And I, been thinking a lot about decoupling, education from the privatized system. Now, we have public universities. When Abraham Lincoln, signed on to have the first land grant colleges, they were actually supposed to be 100% subsidized. And they weren't even available to all communities. Obviously, they weren't available to Black communities then, right? And they weren't available to many communities across the United States. But if my daughter wants to go become a doctor, there ain't no way in hell she's going to go become a doctor, because we can't afford that. But yet, in my community in Appalachia, we don't have doctors. We got hospitals that are closing down all around. We don't have enough healthcare workers. We don't have enough doctors. Everybody's going and being, we can't find a primary care physician, so we're going to the hospitals as our primary care providers, because we don't have insurance. I don't. I got a $70,000 medical bill I have to pay from the last time I had to go to the hospital. So when we look at research and development, our work hours, our work week should be going down, not up. We should be having more time with our families. We should be able to be comfortable in our own skin. We should have job security. I ain't never had that. I was a waitress and worked in restaurant industry and stuff for 15, 16 years, Our pipe dream was maybe we'll have health insurance. Maybe one day we could buy a house when we're 65, If we live long enough, we'll get Medicaid. Woo! So I feel like decoupling education and minimum wage and work from this capitalistic system, like Afeni was just talking about, is we need public legislation in order to be able to do that, because our kids shouldn't just have to go work the line. They should be able to we should be able to contribute to our society and our betterment in all kinds of different ways. It shouldn't be the zip code that you live in that determines your future.
Well said. Josana?
I was thinking, what is the solution for? Can y'all hear me? Sorry,
We can hear you. We can't see you.
Sorry, I'm having all kinds of trouble with technology. It's not my strength. I was thinking about what is the solution for the wage gap, and the only thing that comes to my mind is seizing the means of production, because in my opinion, there is no change coming from electoral politics. There's no change coming from the electoral system. And I think it's funny because I had a conversation with Afeni. I was lucky enough to have her educating me for a little while. And she was telling me about this man that when he was good in his head, he said a revolution happens with a series of reforms that are pushed into the system until the system breaks. And that's what we did back in Brazil. We elected Lula, which is a worker party, leftist. We have 40 parties that we can elect. We elect Lula, leftist, worker parties, and we were opposition to him. We were every day in the streets pushing the reforms that we wanted to see in order to break the system. They intervened, coup d'etat, and they tried to hang on to that. But we were in the streets, and that's what has to happen right now. The only way we can change and we can solve the wage gap is by seizing the means of production, is by owning what we work at. And I think it's funny to bring up the American dream, like rappers like Jay-Z, if you stop and you see their messages, it's awful. It's like sell your soul for the system and be that person that's going to represent the community and lie to your community because you're going to get paid dollar to do so. My interpretation of all his lyrics is this one. Like, it's a lie. It's a lie that people are told every day in this country and outside of here that if you work truly hard, you're going to be a billionaire. It's a lie. You won't. It's a small club that you never, ever going to be part of it. The only way we can go is swimming against the system that's pushing us into slavery, modern times slavery. Before, they were doing in a veiled way. Now it's on our faces because they know we know. And everybody's just stressed, tired, working through a pandemic, dying with no health care, and being pushed back to work. So the economy doesn't crash. So the billionaires don't lack anything. We need to work. So if we are the base of the pyramid, we need to know that we hold the power. We are the ones holding the power, and we have to hold these people accountable. So, okay, you want to be elected, but okay, January 31st, no one is going to pay the student loan debt. Not one person is going to put a cent in your account. What are you going to do? It's believing in our own power as majority. We are the numbers that they need. They need us. It's not the other way around. Wash away the need for the hero outside of your heads. There's no such a thing as a hero. There is a person that has to be held accountable. Elect Delilah. Hold her accountable. Hold her accountable every day. Remember her of her words. Be there. It's not hiring somebody to do the job that you're too tired to do. Because you're too tired. You were made tired by the system. So you're also civil, almost strengthless, weak, sad, passive. And I can be everything else but passive.
Well said, Josana. We're coming up around 9:35. I want to thank everyone on the panel tonight. I really enjoyed this discussion. I hope it was educational for those of you who are watching at home. Before we head out, can everyone let everyone know where they can find you? Let's start with Kim.
Thank you, Sabby. You can go over to Burn It Down with Kim Brown, our YouTube channel. Please give us a subscription if you don't mind. We're also on Twitter, the handle right there at Burn It Down KB. And yeah, we appreciate it. We are here with anybody that is trying to get Black people free in true liberation, not just Black people in America, but Black people around the world, the liberation of women, the amplification of what workers deserve, workers' rights. So yes, come on over to Burn Down with Kim Brown. We'll see you over there.
Margaret.
Yes, blackagendareport.com, news from a Black left perspective. I'm on Twitter at Freedom Ride Blog and patreon.com/Margaret Kimberly. Thank you so much.
Afeni.
So I'll be I'm currently in the process of planning a International Women's Day rally on March 8th, Tuesday, March 8th. So, I'm going to be inviting a couple of these women on this panel probably to speak. So, and we sponsor and travel. So, but yeah, so look out for that. I'll also be doing more housing justice work around DC. So please support those initiatives. We're trying to get some of the unhoused people in DC actual, real, permanent housing. So look out for that work. You can follow me and all my work at Red is Ari. Red with 2 D's is Ari on everything. Instagram, Twitter, all that good stuff. All right.
Keisha and Courtney.
Whoops. Okay, hey, you can find us at Bank Sisters on YouTube. That's where most of our stuff is. We have a podcast that This Is Bullshit. I'm on Twitter, spouting my bullshit at Courtney Banks.
I'm at one of these Keishas. I do not spout very much bullshit, but I will retweet some good stuff.
Delilah.
Thank y'all for sharing the space with me. I'm on Twitter at Delilah for Texas, and my poorly managed website by myself is delilahfortexas.com if you're interested in knowing more about our policies. Thank you.
Zainab.
Hey, yeah, this was one of the best panels I've been on, and I don't know, forever is awesome. But I am at Zainab Day on Twitter, just Zaina, Zanaday on Facebook, and I am working to help build a major new party that's not the Democrat or the Republican Party. We're not shit libs. We are a party that is fighting, and we're still working on our platform. It's still growing, so we need more voices. We need more voices from communities of color. We need more voices to expand. So please sign up, and you can follow us there at peoplesparty.org. Or at People's Party online on both Facebook and on Twitter to learn more about that.
Josana, where can people find you?
People can find me on RBN, Revolutionary Black Health Network. On this Tuesday, we have the International Leftist Coalition, which is my favorite thing to do, is just sit and talk about this. With comrades from around the world about this how can we bring up change together. And I'm also on Twitter at Josanna, JOSANNA 16. Thank you, Eric. Yes, thank you so much, Sabby, for having me on with all these wonderful women. I had a blast.
Thanks so much to all of you for coming on. Again, the goal is to do this once a month, so I'm hoping to put one together in January as well. The dates that work for everybody. But yeah, like guys who are watching, you need to hear from different people. You need to hear from different voices. You need to hear from more people of color, especially on the left. So that's one of the reasons why I wanted to put this panel together. I hope you learned something tonight. I really do. And come back tomorrow. Socialist Alternative will be here. That should be an interesting discussion. We're going to talk about Shama Sawant's win with the recall. And we're going to talk about this cringe conversation that happened with Charlemagne the God and Kamala Harris. We got to talk about that.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. You got to talk about that. Other than that, guys, thanks everyone so much for coming on. And I'm signing out.
Thanks, y'all. Good night.
It was great to meet you guys.
Amazing. Love.
So honored.
Love it.